Today, we are here talking about two things that are important to, I think, nearly all of us. I feel pretty confident in saying that. We are here to talk about our ideas on time versus money and what of those two things, which one is more important to us. We're not here to commentate on there being a right answer to this question, but it's a question that Dominique and I have both encountered in our lives because, we have gone from having full time jobs, making more than enough money to live comfortably off, and we have given up some of that financial security in order to become entrepreneurs and to start our own businesses. And part of the thing with entrepreneurship that we love so much is the control of our own time.
Yeah.
So, Dominique, how has your ideas around time versus money changed since making that leap into opening
Mm.
your own business?
First off, I have to say, it was the most frightening decision I made in a very long time because of the comfort of having a steady paying job, right? And for myself, like you had mentioned, you get to this point where you make money to keep yourself comfortable, but that doesn't always equal happiness, right? We know that. And in my own life, yes, I was making good money. I was living a comfortable life. I was able to provide what it was that I wanted and desired for my life. But I reached burnout and I eventually came to realize that all of those things didn't equal my happiness. And I didn't have the time that I wanted to actually incorporate the activities, the things that I wanted to bring that joy and happiness. And for me, like a lot of it was the level of play that I wanted to build and cultivate within my life. And because of working full time and being burnt out, I was just too exhausted to really do much of it. So when I changed over to wanting to start my own business, it was again like a scary thing because I didn't then have the money that I was used to making, but I had the time. And that took a lot of getting used to. And that also showed me just how crucial having time was for me, especially because of the burnout that I had hit and the time that I needed to really care for my emotional well being and my body, considering that my nervous system was pretty much fried from me hitting burnout. So that was kind of the payoff was okay, I had the time to care for myself the way I needed to, but then there was the idea of having to budget a little differently and cut costs and getting used to that. How about you, Carrie?
Yeah. Well, you touched on something in what you just said that I think is really important to highlight because I think it's something that so many of us can relate to. And that is this idea of, well, I'm going to have this job with financial security and earn money to be really comfortable. But then because we give so much of ourselves to that job, we come home exhausted. And
Mm.
so, what's the point of having the financial security and the money if we don't have the time or energy to enjoy it, to do things that bring us joy, to live in that world of play, like you were saying, like pursuing our passions, pursuing our hobbies that we truly love. And I felt the exact same way. Came home from work. If I had the energy, I was lucky to fit a quick workout in and then just vegged out in front of the TV,
Yeah.
watching Netflix or whatever for the rest of the evening and then go to bed and start it all over the next day. And the thing that just I never felt comfortable with, and I always fought, even when I was a kid in school, was having the times I had to wake up and the times I had to be places dictated to me. And I had no control over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can
I
see
hated
that.
it. I hated it. I think it's just because of my natural cycle as a person
Mm.
is I'm not a morning person. I'm, way more energized in the late afternoons, early evenings. And so those early wake up times for nearly every type of traditional job that any job I ever had, I was waking up at 6 o'clock every day, sometimes even earlier when I had a longer commute to get to work by 8 a.m. And
Yeah, almost like you feel, well, for me, like I felt rushed all the time because I wanted to sleep in as long as possible, right? Because sleep was important for me. And then I felt rushed because I had to be somewhere at a certain time, whether it was with school or work. And then you start the day with like just this whole like cluster of just craziness,
right,
and
like
that
frantic
carries,
energy.
yes, yeah, exactly. And for me it was around the pandemic when I was like, you know what, there's got to be a different way to do this.
Mm,
Like there cannot be just one way of working and being frantic and having to have your work life dictated by, other people with whether it's time or anything else schedule. And that's where I just really started to look outside of that and see like, okay, how, if I could have my dream job, what would that look like? How many hours would I work? And so I just started to kind of get clear on it because ultimately we can't create time. We could
right.
be,
It's like
right?
a finite resource.
Yeah.
And it sounds cliche, but as I've gotten older,
Mhm.
that's become more apparent to me. Like, I
Yes.
mean, if we're going on statistics, we're halfway through our life about.
Right.
And so we only have half the time left that we've already lived here.
Yeah. And then you can't, you can't use money to buy more time, right?
Nope.
So when I would sit down and think about these things, I was like, okay, this is a tricky one because, like you said in the beginning, that balance is so hard because you need the time to make money, and then you need money to be able to open up space and time for the things that you want to do to have more freedom. So it's that round and round and round cycle. And I mean, this is why we're talking about it, because I think it's important for everyone out there just to kind of give some thought to it and to know that it is possible. We see people do it all the time where they are drastically cutting down their work hours and even making more money. It's just a matter, I believe that it's a matter of getting super, super clear on what you want for your life and what that freedom and extra time looks like, what it feels like, and starting with that and working with that. And it's not, again, it's not easy by no means to just be like, oh, okay, this is what I want. And now let's go get it. But it certainly starts with having clarity on the value of each of those and what that looks like for you.
Yeah. For me, and I think for most people, freedom of time is the ultimate freedom. It's not having lots of money gives a sense of freedom as well, but there's strings attached. Usually, if you're earning money in the traditional way, there's strings attached to that money. And so it doesn't feel as free as having complete control over your time.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a flip side to that coin that other
Oh,
people would argue
right.
that no, I mean, money is very important. It allows us so much more freedom in terms of having money to pay for experiences,
Mm,
for buying all of the necessities and the comforts of life, for having good health care. If you live in the United States, you have to have money to get good health care.
yeah.
But like you said, we sacrifice the freedom of time in order to obtain money, which is like this catch 22 we find
Yeah.
ourselves in, or this double-edged sword.
Yeah. It's so incredibly tricky. And again, going back to what I said, where I took the opportunity with the pandemic to really just sit back and look at my life and how I was feeling, not just with what I was, being able to provide myself, but that emotional well-being. And I came to realize that my emotional well-being was more important with, the size of the house that I had, or the car that I was driving, or the clothes that I was wearing. And, I could easily get away with much less when it comes to the material things versus less time to care for my nervous system, my physical well-being, and that to me was ultimately what guided me into wanting to start my own business. And again, I think it's just really about getting clear on what you want your time, your remaining time on this planet to look like, what is most important to you when it comes to how you want to spend that time. But I don't think there's, a good answer here. Like one isn't better than the other. It's just, again, like a contemplation, I think is just super important for everyone. But
I do think it's an important question for everyone to ask themselves, to really get in touch with your own perspective on this, so that answering this question in my eyes can really help guide people toward living a more aligned life, if you can answer which one of these things is more important to you.
yeah, for sure. And I think it'd be great if we shared a little bit about how we came to the decision to prioritize whether, for us, if it's the time over, the money that was coming in, because I'm sure there's plenty of listeners that are feeling this frustration just as we are and we have. So, Carrie, I'd love to hear what's one thing that you could give as like maybe a tip to those who are wanting to think more deeply on this for themselves?
I think getting in touch with what you truly value. So, I was a person who had a lot of stuff, and I loved my stuff. I grew up in a family that loved stuff. We got a lot of joy out of buying stuff. And I think once I realized, for me personally, that stuff was weighing me down and making me like a servant to it. It inhibited my freedom. It inhibited my freedom of being able to pack up and move if I wanted to. Like, it create a whole logistical situation of having to deal with the stuff if I wanted to do that. And so for me, really letting go of this idea that my stuff defines me, my stuff is part of me, because
Mm-hmm.
it really is not. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that this is an easy concept to identify with.
Not at
But
all. Yeah.
that idea of minimalism, which I know is a hot topic or a buzzword
Mm-hmm.
lately, but just really thinking about what are the bare things I need for my comfort, for my happiness. And when I really started asking myself that, and really like, does this bring me happiness?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's supporting me functionally or in a comfort sense. Like for us, we've talked about how much we love planners and
Yeah.
stationery and
Mm-hmm.
pen and paper. I still have a lot of that stuff because I love using it.
Yeah.
But
But
the
you've
minute I look at
identified.
some,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's your joy.
So for me, just really getting clear on what things in my life do I
Mm-hmm.
actually love versus, well, I just had this because it was a trend, or because I thought I needed it, but now I haven't touched it in 6 months.
Right, right. Yeah. And I know like for as long as we've known each other, you've always talked about like your love of minimalism and just how much it transformed your life. And as I kind of sit here and I hear you talking about it, like in my mind, when I'm thinking about, okay, the time versus money, I'm like, all right, well, I know for me, if I had less, that means I'd be saving time on the amount of cleaning I would have to do. Like that to me is a big point because I hate cleaning and I hate clutter. And that right away, I was like, oh man, you get some of your time back because you're not having to worry about all of this stuff and cleaning around it and organizing it. And then, of course, you're saving money by not collecting all of the things that you don't necessarily need to have a good life. But as you
Exactly.
mentioned, it's challenging. It really
Yeah.
is, especially with our culture, always talking about fancy cars and clothes and, all of the fun stuff.
Right. And our culture leads us to believe that those are the things that lead to a successful person or a person who's admirable or a person who's worthy
Right.
are people who have these finer things in life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that you shared that was a big part of what motivated you, just that kind of minimalism mindset, and that I know just again in conversation has made a huge impact on your life, and I know can be super beneficial for other people to hear, especially those out there that are wanting to start their own journey to just being a little bit more intentional with what they bring into their lives as far as materials. That's something that I am definitely going to be implementing more into my own life because, like I mentioned, I know I can gain more time by minimizing what I have in my house on the cleaning side, but so much more too. Um, but for myself, and one thing that I am excited to kind of share as far as a tip goes for people is the power in saying no. For me, this was so crucial because I grew up as someone who wanted to please everyone, and saying no was like the worst thing I could possibly do. And that, of course, ate up a lot of my time doing things for others versus myself, and things that weren't necessarily building my life the way I wanted to. So, learning to say no really brought back a lot of time for the things that brought me joy, the things that I wanted to work towards to grow within, like my business, even learning to say no to specific clients that I knew weren't aligned for my coaching packages. And I didn't want to say yes just to make the money, but making sure that I said no if it wasn't a right fit, because it was leaving space, opening space for those that are or were a right fit. So, and that was another part of it as well, is making sure that I'm really just going with what I feel is going to enrich my life, my business, and of course, I want to still be there for other people, but it was something where I would step back and ask myself, like, okay, is this something that I have to do, or that I feel that I need to do, or do I want to do it? And that kind of helped me to identify what things I should say no to open up more time within my life, my schedule. When you open up that time, then you're also welcoming opportunities that are going to be in greater alignment. And for me, that's what has brought in, the money side of things, where I've had my clients, my aligned clients, come into my life because I had that opening for them. So
Yeah.
it's been a powerful practice that I've been putting into place the past couple of years, is just learning to say no to balance out that aspect of it, time versus money. But I think, again, there's no right or wrong way, as we've mentioned before. And it's just taking the opportunity to get clear on, we're going to talk, again, values, those core values. What is most important to you? How is that going to impact your time, your money, and really making sure that you try to find balance in some way. And that looks different for every person.